Mike's going to start off with a short, I think, overview of some key ideas. It's very keen that we actually get your interaction and your voice into this as well. So please don't hesitate to ask questions. As Mary said, if you could just wait until the microphone's in your hands, because this is being recorded and we can pick it up that way. So it's my pleasure to introduce Mike and to hand over to you to talk for 15 or 20 minutes about the main ideas, I think, to provoke some discussion.
Thank you, Mary. Those of you who know me know I'm not very formal. So I like to keep it informal. A couple of comments. I've been involved with Media City since Linda and I, the software team, Peel, software development of Media City. And what I'm interested in, my whole career for the last several decades, is I'm always interested in what's next. And I'm at MIT because it's a wonderful base to allow you to ask what's next. When you're a consulting firm, you have to sort of deal with now. I'm interested in what's next. And what I'm interested in MediaCityUK, because it's one of about 8 or 9 projects around the world that are not real estate projects. So there certainly are real estate projects, and there's normal real estate projects. But the purpose, excuse me, but the purpose of them is really to create new clusters of innovation that will help invent the future. And I'll go over some of those other projects in a moment. So they're really, it's about, if MediaCityUK were just a real estate development project, you know, it would be of interest, but would not be the kind of interest it is now about creating ecology of creativity and innovation. And I'm in many ways fortunate. I live in a world of innovation in every way. Not only my consulting work, I mean, I live at MIT, and East Cambridge, Boston, the area is called East Cambridge, Kendall Square, where MIT is the heart of it, is probably one of the greatest innovation clusters in the world. And what's interesting about, I mean, it's had 3 different lives since the war. After the war is about electronics and missile guidance systems and sonar and radar. Then it changed over a 20-year period, because using computers and computer science. And now it's probably the world's greatest cluster of biotechnology. But what's interesting, and I think this is the key part I want to make, it's not just biotechnology, because as interesting as that is, the interesting thing about the cluster of creativity is convergence, and that's the word I want to go on. Bringing together different disciplines, different things, I'll go into a moment, not to coordinate, not to do interdisciplinary work, which means you each go your own way and work together. But convergence means you bring fields together to invent something, a new way, a whole new way of thinking about things. So if you look at the cluster around MIT, the 3 major things you have are biotechnology, nanotechnology, and infographics. Now people say those are very different fields, but they're not, because if you're talking about what they're really interested in, and the cluster is interested in new products. So if you're interested in the new form of dealing with cancer, where you're dealing with DNA that will affect Alzheimer's disease, the only way you can do it is the biotechnology. And biotechnology, learns how to deal with the genes and genome. Nanotechnology is the diagnostic that gets inside the gene. Can you imagine it? Getting inside cells, not only to diagnose them, but to treat them. Because if you come up with medicines or new therapies, you have to deliver them. So you have to have the nanotechnology with the biotechnology. Why infographics? Because you can't see DNA. You cannot see a nanobite. I mean, you can't see them. They just don't, they're just not there. So you have to have ways of representation. And so in effect, one way you can think about it is is convergence. And you find these teams coming together at the very beginning of problem framing, not after they've framed the problem. They come together and say, okay, how do we work together? So it's convergence, and the convergence, I know tonight we're supposed to talk about public spaces and science, art and science, but it's more than just science. It's what we're doing in America. I think the thing we're very concerned about with our competitive position is what they call STEM. I think you are too: science, technology, engineering, and math. But we find, at least at MIT and other places that are really, I think, on the cutting edge of creative thinking, it's STEM plus art. And all of them, what they have in common, they're really about design. At the heart of these are design. They're design problems. So when we talk about convergence, it's not only the disciplines of biotechnology, nanotechnology, informatics, it's also a convergence of the place, because the place is about idea creation, knowledge creation, knowledge capture, and knowledge application. So a real cluster is all those things together. right? So it's knowledge creation, knowledge capture, and knowledge adaptation to make products. And so if you look at the spectrum of who does things, you get universities, you get small firms, you get big firms, little firms, and all. So you get all that's another focus. All those things have to be in a cluster. And I think slowly, MediaCityUK is beginning to develop those kinds of clusters. The other kind of thing I think is really important is two other kinds of convergence happening. One is around age. The wonderful thing we find in the great clusters is a convergence of ages. At MIT, you know, we have Nobel Prize winners. But we also, our research teams at MIT are such that we have undergraduate freshmen on those teams. We fund that, we support that different ways. So you get teams that go from, you know, research teams that go from senior professors, researchers, undergraduates, graduate students, plus people from companies. So it's not only the age differences, and I'll show you in a moment, we even get into elementary school kids on our teams, right? Which is really important part of this convergence. And then it's convergence of enterprises. So I know the people, we're in this now technology, one of the latest additions to our cluster is Pfizer. And, you know, and Pfizer is closing most of its research activities in the United States and coming to the Cambridge cluster. And I know the people pretty well, and I said, why are you coming here, you know? And they said the two biggest things on our part are certain kinds of cancers, which certain kinds of cancer, not cancers, diseases, but certain kind of elements of cancer, and Alzheimer's disease. And they said there is no way in the world we can do that ourselves. We have to find big firms and little firms who are working on pieces that we can join together. So again, a cluster brings these things together. A cluster is designed and managed in a way to encourage that to happen. So that's what I mean by sort of clusters. So, I mentioned the MediaCityUK, about one of 9 or 10 clusters around the world. And I think you should really feel good about this. Because you are, in some ways, MediaCityUK inventing the future. Let me just say something about these clusters. All the ones I'm talking about, they're great clusters like Silicon Valley, Cambridge, I guess they call it, whatever they call it, Cambridge, your Cambridge cluster is one. Another one is on MIT. They're existing clusters, but most of these clusters have grown over 40, 50, 60 years. The clusters that were started after the year 2000 try and jumpstart and get to someplace within 15 years. That's an enormous kind of step, so it's a set of moves there. And the clusters, I'll just mention it because it's really interesting to know that we're sort of west-east. You've got MediaCityUK, there's Zaragoza, Spain. Belfast has a cluster called Titanic, which is, as a real estate project, it's the largest waterfront real estate project in Europe. But it's also about science and certain kinds of media. Then jumping over from Spain, you go to Copenhagen, Helsinki. Those two other, they're called Abu Dhabi and Ramen, of course, was Copenhagen. And each of these clusters have an industry focus that's unique to them. There's a whole set of reasons, which we won't go into, you probably know, why it's a media cluster here. In Helsinki, it's a design cluster, because they already had that base in their building. So they're all contextually based why they have that. So jumping from Helsinki and Copenhagen, the next one is in Abu Dhabi. And there they're creating a cluster about the media. Very, very different than the media cluster here, which is invented in the future. Their story is very simple. We want to create an Arab media for the Arabs, by the Arabs. It's a very clear story, and then you do things. Once you understand your story, you start building a set of programs to make that happen. Then you go over to Singapore. Singapore is building a science cluster. Why a science cluster? One, Singapore's only resource is brains and the people they have. And Singapore sees that even though with China developing, if they get a head start in developing certain technologies, they will be the entree to not only to China, but other parts of South Asia. And they're competing very heavily now with China itself. Now with Japan, so with China itself. So again, you're trying to develop these clusters for a reason. It's all about the future, inventing extraordinary economic value for your city and sometimes for your nation. And then the other one you jump over to is Seoul, which again has a media city. It's interesting, there are a number of media cities. The reason they call media cities, they're really about, as we come to recognize, as you have in the UK, that the creative arts and soft knowledge things are as important as manufacturing. But let me say something that's really interesting. We're not doing away with manufacturing. A lot of these clusters have manufacturing. I don't think you do here. A lot of them have manufacturing, but the manufacturing is different. It's not heavy tanks or airplanes. It's manufacturing of small things. So if you're talking about at MIT, the area around MIT is a very heavy manufacturing area. And say, oh, there's no manufacturing, there are no plants there. Well, you're managing delivery systems, nanotechnology and delivery systems. Those are products. So almost everything we have also are makings. They just have to be miniature. Right? They're not big, but they're still manufacturing. And I think what people are beginning to realize, if you read, I'm sure you read Economist, Financial Times, there's so many increasing amount of articles that society cannot survive economically on the creative knowledge, soft industries. It must still do manufacturing. It must still make things, right? So he's making, he's making a product, right? It's not just being creative, it's a product that'll be there. So again, we have to think about these product things. So the other thing is, so we get, as I say, these are big. Oops. This one is, this is Copenhagen. And the other thing that I think is important, I just want to point out, is that these places, as I say, are big. Like MediaCity is big, and this is just phase one that's been built here, so imagine how big it is. And it's like Canary Wharf would be the smallest one. Canary Wharf is not, by the way, it's not a cluster that I'm talking about. Canary Wharf is a collection of industries in the same industry. And there's some benefits of aggregation, but it's not a cluster because it's not inventing the future financial industry. It's a different thing. These are different. But they're big, okay, they're big. They're on the scale of that. But the other thing is not only, and this is, I think, I don't have to tell you here because of what the school is about, the future place is not just physical, it's virtual. Right? So this is sort of, this is from MIT. This is one type of interchange of electronic messages. So it's much as important than that. There's a time map. I showed this once to somebody, this is the MIT campus, I didn't know all these pointy high-rise buildings on the campus. No, these are peaks. During the day, we peaked all the messages, connectivity around the world, okay? So, I mean, you have to think that these places are not just physical, but they're also virtual. And it's not either or. The physical world won't go away, the virtual world will not take over. They'll be so blended. So every time you pick up your cell phone, every time you go to the web, you're entering another world. You're still in a chair. It's going to be a long time before, like Star Wars, we go, poof, transponder stuff. Will be physical and virtual, but don't think of them separate. So all these places, and again, the characteristics of these places, physical places, are in effect physical and virtual, and every one of them, the connectivity is absolutely essential. They're mixed use because they're 21st century type of lifestyles, which are mixed use. They think about work and play and work, and they're all blended because the boundaries are now folded. So they all deal with that in the design. But they're all capable of being connected. And I think connectivity is absolutely essential. Now, whether you pay for it, don't pay for it, that's a secondary issue. The issue is you must be connected at all times because the world is physical and digital. If you can't enter one to the other, from one to the other simultaneously and smoothly, you're really missing something. So again, one of the things that we're really interested in, and I just touched briefly on this because I've been more interested in process than outcome, is another thing that you have a design of these places. Think about them for the future and of the future. So why should they look like the future? So you want to begin to develop an environment that says we are the future. And this does not mean, I did some plan once for 1 year cluster that was very much sort of a digital marketplace. It was the notion about Covent Garden. You think about Covent Garden as an environment, we all know that environment. It's a very buzzy place. But Covent Garden, was thought about in 1960. Right? It was first formed, and it worked well for 30 years. You would not design a place like Covent Garden now in 2030 based upon an idea of 1960. So in effect, how do you begin to think of the digital Covent Garden? Because it's the characteristics of performance of people connected to each other, of experience, of peripheral vision, all those kinds of things. So these places all use, visual media technology blended in physical fabric to make them interesting, right? I mean, this is a scene from Copenhagen, and it's not just an image there, but I mean, what they do is this is a performance. They had a performance of theater in the evening, just like you'd have any place, but it was a nice evening, and it was summertime, and they had the performance on a large screen. The building, what was interesting, didn't have a screen. The building is the screen. It's the technology's there. The building is the screen. And so you had this whole dance performance and literally thousands of people watching that. And what did that do? It had a very, very positive effect, not only of enjoying the theater, but it built a sense of community. And it's a community that's different. I used to go to theater when I was young, you know. I would go to the theater and sit in the audience. And you have one kind of experience. There's another kind of experience. It's very much a 21st century experience. Doesn't mean that the legitimate theater goes away. You still will go to Lowry and enjoy that. But it's another kind of experience. So again, if you're building a place for the future, it should feel like the future. It should not feel like an office park from 1970. So you use these technologies. This is one example. Here's another technology. This is, I don't know if Juan is here from Zaragoza. And yeah, so I can't say too much. In Zaragoza, Spain, they've created this digital model, which is taking digital technology and applying it to the physical environment. And they had this opportunity. They had the World Expo in 2008. And they wanted something to symbolize, and the theme was water. So working with a group, this beginning to get the theme of artists and engineers working together. They created something called the Digital Water Pavilion. Now, the Digital Water Pavilion was the entrance to the expo. And the walls were all made of water. And as you walked through, the water opened up around you and closed behind you, and sometimes left an image of you. And the mayor loved it because he said, me and Moses, you know. but what was interesting about it, I mean, it was of the future for the future, right? And what was interesting, so it worked for 7 million people passed through that wall. And it did a couple of things. One, it not only delighted people as a way, but it branded the place. Because part of making future places, you have to let people know you're doing. So it branded the places. This digital wall was written up in over 200 magazines. Right? It was one of Time magazine's 50 best innovations of the year 2000. But what's even more interesting than that, so it was created for that, but now it is a community facility. What it is, after this expo was over, they said, we've got this thing, what are we going to do with it? Well, we want to program it in a way that anybody can come to this and play with it. So they hired some university students. Okay? And the university students essentially did an open source programming. And what you have now, you have kids coming here, 10-year-old kids with their Wii games, and that's their screen board. You have disc jockeys coming here for disco parties, and people, when it's nice outside, they dance on the streets and the wall relights to them. Right, so it's becoming a place of the future for the future. Is it the only place? No. We still have theaters? Yes. We still have discos? Yes. But this is something different, because again, the other thing you want to do, not only brand the other future for the future, because we're trying to attract people we want to work here. Okay? So two other things. It's a laboratory. In effect, it allows high school kids, college kids, elementary school, to learn how to do it. It's their laboratory. It's theirs. They can do it within these rules that are set up. You know, you can't do certain things, but you can do almost anything you want. And one of the reasons that's important, not only do you want to brand it of the future, make it for the future, one of the key goals that I think you certainly have in software, you certainly have in Zaragoza, you cannot have a population in the future that's not digitally literate. Right? You have to be digitally literate in the future to compete in the environment, in the economy. So yes, you can teach courses in school, right? You can go do those things. But if you build this stuff into the environment, you're digitally literate. I mean, you know, we all have some cousin or nephew who's 6 years old who can outwit any of us on a computer game. So you learn by doing, and part of that's bringing that to the public environment. So it's a great thing. I mean, it's really fun. I don't have the video because I don't trust the web in a place like this. But it really, if you want to go to Digital Water Pavilion in San Jose, you see these great videos of this thing working. So it's still there now, and people use it all the time. The other thing, I mean, this is an idea that we did for one city. It wasn't executed for a variety of reasons, but in fact, this is what we created, what we call the digital marketplace. Taking all the principles of Covent Garden and see how would you play those out today using digital technology. And we had things, I mean, the walls, the glass, say a wall. The wall was a computer screen. And at one moment, it could be just a normal wall, like this, right? Or white, or whatever, it could be glass, pure glass you see through. The next moment, it was a screen. And we could actually, we've done this other place, where kids in England, or kids, in this case, kids in America, can actually work on a screen with kids who are in Korea and dance together, parties together, whatever. It's really interesting to see some of these, so romances developing on the screens. And it's only one thing that happens, it sort of ends at a point where you're like 6,000 miles apart. But you get the whole dynamic developing, whether it's dance or socialization, so it becomes something that people say, wow, that's a great environment. And it's not, and I want to say, it's not Disneyland. And And the wonderful thing about digital technology, you can turn it off. It doesn't have to be in your face all the time. And in Japan, technology is in your face all the time. But a colleague of mine said, we shower in information. Right? And they don't mind, it just sort of comes into them. Westerners don't do it, they get overloaded. You turn it off. So again, I mean, so these are things, I mean, so you're creating a whole new environment in these places of innovation. So these places are laboratories, they're brands, right? They're places that delight people, they're all sorts of things, for tourists, for people who work there, for people who live there. All of them, and the nice thing about, again, digital technology, you can program it so people can make their own space. You really want to get away with this corporate stuff. You put some screens up, and you program it, and you say, oh, that's nice, and after seeing it once, it's not so nice. Well, think about it, you can create your own space. Hey, this is a simple thing, I make this thing go, but you can do these things with technology. This is the Seoul Digital Media City. This is interesting, again, it's very similar in some ways to MediaCityUK, but God bless the Koreans. I mean, when they move fast, they did a couple years ago, they took down a major highway through the city, and they rebuilt the whole thing in a year and a half. We did the same thing in Boston, took us 14 years. I mean, Koreans have this wonderful expression called poly. Hurry, hurry, fast, fast. And they poly. So they built this thing. It was planned in 2000, okay? And now it has 158 companies, 40,000 jobs, 5,000 people. Only Korea could have done that fast. It really works, okay? So again, the notion of this ecology that's being there, it's again, it has big companies, small companies, technology companies, art companies, television companies, radio companies. You got BBC, they got BBS, Buddhist Broadcasting System. So, I mean, but again, it's all about that. It's all about new ways of working. One of the important things to notice, in Korea, the entrepreneurial class is eaten up and spit out by big companies. It's just the way it is. One of the things is to change that environment where little companies can grow. So this is part of the ecology of the place, and there are ways of doing that. But the other thing, again, about environment, we created the environment, this is my team, we took the main street, and we said the main street is going to be a digital media street. And this was done, you gotta remember, in 2000, before we had even iPhones. And there was no Twitter, believe it or not, there was no Twitter. And we said we're going to use this place as a laboratory for developing new digital technologies. Right, so there are different plans with different purposes, I won't go into detail. But the notion was that companies would use this place as laboratories. So if LG wanted to create a new street light, and they had a street light they came up with that interacts with people on the street. So if you're drunk, which happens over there, you're walking down the street, the light will go with you. If you're a woman alone, the light expands. I mean, it's very responsive. And they pay to experiment here. We use that money to get some local, small firm and pay them to do things. So it's not only does it entertain people by doing things, but it's a laboratory for creativity. It's a place of the future for the future. And for Korea, it's extremely important because Korea is making a huge move from being the best manufacturer of somebody else's idea to being a creative economy. So again, it reinforces that notion, right? And again, here, these are just, I wish I had time, but these are examples. It's been thought through as a set of experiences that are coordinated. Now, it doesn't mean there's one central authority that says do it, right? One of the problems is you're still in immature space here. You're doing a lot of interesting stuff here, for example, right? There are a lot of interesting things about it, but there's no trace. There's no build-up to this place, and so they're doing it, right? Now I want to talk a little bit, and there'll be a few more things before I open up, because I can talk forever about digital space, and it'd be fun, I could whistle some well, but I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk, how do you create it? How do you get a process that says you're going to create these things? How do you bring together different disciplines? I think one of the things about convergence, where you're bringing different disciplines together, different age groups, different companies, one of the reasons you're doing it, it's not because God said we should do it, it's a good thing to do. The problems and opportunities we face in society now cannot be solved by any one discipline. It's impossible. As Pfizer said, we cannot find the genes and deliver the medicine to deal with Alzheimer's without working with 5 different disciplines. It's the only way to do it. Same thing in making these places. And MIT is really good at it. And I want to tell you why, because this is the topic I was supposed to talk about art and science. It's in the genes of people at MIT who work across boundaries. And how did it start? It started a long time ago. We're this way. faculty members would get together because they like to play music. We have maybe 10 or so faculty quartets. And they actually not only perform on their own, but they come and perform in public spaces first. And so, you know, you get a case like this, that's a Nobel Prize winner in biotechnology. He's a philosopher, he's an architect. They get together because they need to get together, they all have those skills. Didn't matter what discipline, but that comes out of that when they're there. Not only do they make music, but they talk. And they develop an attitude and respect. You know, you're sitting around over a cup of coffee, what are you doing? I'm an architect, most of the time I hear something about nanotechnology. You know, I'm a music composer, and all of a sudden I hear something about architecture. It begins to develop an environment by doing. It's not by talking, it's by doing that leads to talking. It's really important. I mean, do it, instead of talk about it. So that carries over into climate. In MIT, about 1960s, they said, boy, we training smart engineers and scientists. They don't know nothing about society, no culture, no grace. Every student at MIT, there's two things. They take all the first 2 years, they take all the same courses in science, technology, you know, that everybody else does. But they also have to have, everybody has to have 1/4 of their course has to be humanities. And boy, if you think it's political science has trouble with physics, a physics major has a hell of a lot of trouble writing a paper. So and the thing is, he has trouble writing a paper because it's not what he does. You know, they're technologists. And what they do is they go to someone who's an English major, somebody writes and help me. All right? And also the other thing about MIT, everything, the whole notion about training students, the first 2 years, same courses, and you're not given tests, you're given problem sets. These are very complicated problems you have 3 a week, and they have to be turned in the next day. If you look at the internet connection at MIT, it goes like this, and then 11 o'clock, it goes like this, off the wall. What is when you discover you can't solve the problem? So, you know, I'm a political scientist, oh my God, I'll call Joe, who's a physicist, and Joe says, no, I can't do it, but call Harry, he's in chemistry. So they develop, if you talk to MIT students about interdisciplinary, they say, oh, what's that? It is so ingrained. And part of it comes out of the whole thing that the faculty are like that. Right? It's learning by doing and doing by learning. It's a whole thing. I just want to spend a moment on Chris Janey, because Chris Janey, wait, he doesn't know I'm doing this, I have to tell him this. Chris Janey graduated from MIT maybe 15, 20 years ago. And he's exactly the kind of person we're talking about here, you want to train. Chris was a physicist, studied physics, he has a bachelor of science in physics. He didn't like physics, so he became an architect. Because there is a connection. That people know. I mean, there's a real connection between physics, the way you think. Again, about a design problem. Physics taught us design problems rather than discipline. So Chris became an architect, and then somehow he got involved. He met some artists. Particularly, he met a guy named Chemistry, very well known. He met some other people in arts. People don't know. MIT is one of the best music schools in the world. Do you know that? Most people don't because it's electronic music. You know, it's like we have several people well-known electronic musicians. Okay, so Chris got involved with this, and Chris said, "Well, I want." So remember, he himself is transdisciplinary. He's a physicist, he's an architect, and he's now into music by choice. Okay, so he started, and he's interested in the public realm because of that architecture stuff. So, and again, this gets into what the public realm is. Chris makes artifacts in the public realm that people interact with, and they make the experience by what Chris provides. So the public realm in places, the public realm are streets, parking garages, museums, office lobbies, okay? So any place where the public goes is a public realm. It's not just the street or the plaza. It's any place, it's a lobby. So he does all these things, and here's some examples. This is Sonic Forest, and it moves around the world. And he's done it all over the world. What he does is basically sets it up, mostly on college campuses, it lasts for 4 or 5 weeks, sometimes a month, 2 months. And as people walk by, it starts making music. It starts showing lights. They are creating the environment, okay? And what people choose to do, they choose to play with it because it's fun, it's engaging. But again, you think of how it was made. It's made by convergence of 4 or 5 different towns. He not only does it himself, he works with other people. It's all the conversion of these people that make this place. There's another one. This is in Dallas Airport. And I go to Dallas a lot because it goes someplace that goes there. You usually have a 2-hour wait.
You sit there, it gets really boring walking around. This is what this is you walk through it, it sets off music and light. So you see people, you can do it, just have fun. I've seen entire families go there, groups of people, and they play, they create a symphony for themselves. Again, what is this doing? It's not in your face. You can choose to use it or just look at it as a piece of sculpture, fine. You know, just like you look at a newsstand. Or you can use it, but you create it. And when it says to people in Dallas, it says several things. One, we are delighting you. We respect you. The biggest thing about some of these things says to people, we respect you. We allow you to create the environment. We allow you to find a way of delighting yourself rather than giving a canned thing about, you know, of scenery. So it's there, and again, it says we're a modern airport. Okay, so it brands things, and everybody who goes to Dallas knows that and brands Dallas. He's done other things in other installations. This is interesting too. You know the New York City subway system. You know, it's one of the older systems. I don't think it's old. I don't know if it's as old as mine, but it's a really old system, and it's very, very heavily used. These things you see up here on this thing, those are musical instruments. Okay, and you know, you see the woman touching her hand. As people stand there, they do this, and 3 or 4 people do this. You get music, you get light. Now, what's interesting, this 34th Street, one of the busiest subway stops in New York City, and everybody said, "Oh, Chris, you're a jerk. It's going to be vandalized within 5 days." Now, New York's pretty good at that. It'll be vandalized. It's been there for 10 years and nobody's touched it. And everybody says, "Why?" And the reason is because they play with it. So if a gang comes down there, or bad guys come down there, they take it apart, somebody's going to beat them up because then they can't play with it. I'm serious, this is what happens. We find in every kind of environment, if you give people ownership of it, they don't vandalize, they take ownership of it, they protect and they enhance it. But again, it's this kind of attitude that comes from convergence. Right, so Chris has gone from physics, he brought his physics knowledge, he brought his architectural knowledge, physics, computer science, and his art. He creates these things, but also he also says, it's another thing he's bringing, the notion about people are the ones who use the environment. And I will shape things that they can use, not that I will tell them how to use. Okay? So it's part of that whole thing. I mean, it's the same thing as busking in a way. You know, people choose that and choose what to do. And this is interesting too, I don't know if you can see this, but this is Chris. Chris not only does Chris create these environments, he plays in these environments themselves. Chris plays with orchestras and with jazz bands. He plays with a computer. So this is the jazz concert that I went to. That's why I photographed Chris. That's my photograph. It's a jazz concert that Chris went to, and he was playing the computer. So that's the expression of jazz in visual art. Now, this happened to be in a theater, but it could have just been in the public environment also. And this was once in the public environment. Before we lost our World Trade Centers, every week they had public concerts, right? They opened up the entire area to the public. They weren't afraid of the public. They wanted the public to be there because they wanted to brand them. Because again, you know, you learn if you own a building, the more people come to the building, the higher rents. I mean, it really. But this so it used to be on the streets every Friday. You find Chris playing his jazz with the jazz band, and you get light there. This is again the water world show was there. Oh, the interesting thing is now again, everybody says, "Oh, you know, how do you get scientists to do work with artists?" Well, the reality is, if you scratch a scientist, scratch an artist, there's more common than we think there is. I found out I was with a colleague the other day who I know as a theater director, and she told me she's a physics major. Oh my God, man. You know, you don't know where people come from. Look at these statistics. There are 4,000 undergraduate students at MIT, and this term, of those 4,000 undergraduates, 1,800 are taking courses in other musical theater. And they're not required to. Think about that. These engineers, probably, you know, the greatest nerds in the world. They're into theater. There's another thing. MIT student I know might be amazing computer programming or budding engineer, but actually really want to play the violin, really want to play the guitar, and can do that very well. So in effect, I think you find, when you're talking about convergence, it's not making convergence. Convergence happens because, in some cases, it's the only way to deal with a problem. It's the only way to grab an opportunity, or because they want to do it. And I think that what we're finding in a lot of our programs, education programs, that I think are more advanced, they're allowing these things to happen. They're not making them happen, they're not making formal courses, They're allowing the students to take things where they want to take them, and then they're putting the rigor of learning down. Okay? They're not just chaos. So all these courses we have that are open like this are not chaotic. They're very rigorous, even though they're driven by the students. The job of the teacher becomes from this to this. All right? They bring rigor, they bring reflection, they bring thought, they bring knowledge and theory, but they bring it this way as opposed to this way, and the students are driving the work themselves. The responsibility shifts from the teacher to a partnership between teacher and student. And what's so important about that is the economy of the future. Forget that it's more interesting, forget that it's more engaging, is you cannot survive as a society unless you bring another generation who can do those kinds of things. So, I mean, it's more than a passion. So one of the things that happens, you get the students at MIT who do these things, right? And these are the things that they do during the year. MIT has something called hacks. We know of hacking when you break into something. MIT is a hack, is a technology practical joke. And there's certain rules, you cannot do harm, you cannot deface property, but the rule is if you do a hack and it meets the rules, MIT cannot take it down for 48 hours. And we've had cases where students have done prank, done hacks, and the police have taken down the administration, the police put them back up because they were there. I mean, so in effect, so what you get out of MIT students, you get things like this, right? Is this creating a public environment? Yes. And they're doing it because they wanted to. They do this on the river, right? These are different times, these are different projects. Students want to do it. Some do it for credit, some do it not for credit. It doesn't matter, we just want people doing these things. We want them doing with other people. We actually have competition, give prizes to encourage them. The whole thing is giving permission. Right? It's not only encouraging, it's giving permission to do it. And part of giving permission is the fact that they join you in it. There's another thing, these pods do weird things. Kids make it go. It's like science fiction. Kids can talk to these pods, they fly around. They're fun. This is interesting. This is a piece of art, right? It's not art, it's an equation. Don't ask me to explain. It is art explaining an equation, a very complex equation. And they made art out of it, right? I mean, is it a piece of art? Is it a piece of physics work? It's both, right? Because what's interesting is they say artists find beauty in a physics equation. I don't understand it. I find that of interest to me, right? But again, they're making it because they want to make it, and they're bringing a culture working together because they want to make something that put their mark in place. This is another thing that was interesting too. Again, MIT did this, and we sort of, this is again, is this art or is this technology? What it is we had a project where AT&T funded it, and this traces every phone call out of Brooklyn, New York, a subsection of New York, and where it went in the world. That's what it is. But it was exhibited in the Museum of Art for a year. Is it art? Is it technology? You know? It's both, right? So again, it's really interesting where some of the calls went. I mean, we didn't, at the DEA, our drug enforcement agency, looked at it, probably gets some interesting information out of it, but yeah, I mean, the calls there, so it's art. There's another thing, everything we do, we have a wonderful museum at MIT called MIT Museum. It's a museum of technology, and it's so much fun. Because what it is, it not only puts robots there and, holographs, but everybody goes and plays with them. So they go, young kids go there, or students go there, whoever wants to go there, and they play with that robot. So it's not just looking, it's playing. And this is another example, right? This is an early time, you have these tables out there. This is an early model of that. These are young kids, we bring them to MIT to do that. We have 4 weeks a year, weekends a year, called Splash. For any kid who goes to public schools up to the age of 15 can come to MIT and take all these weird courses and play with technology. Like this. But this is interesting. This is, I think I'm getting in my end of my comments. This is something that goes back. 1990, Seymour Papert, you may know the name, and Marvin Minsky, two really heavy-duty scientists, okay, these are really serious science, joined with the people in media technology who are artists and computer scientists, and they wanted to go into public schools to see what little kids could do about making things out of computers. And they went to very deprived schools with, poor kids. kids did not come from wealthy homes or well-educated homes. And they sort of turned them loose on things. And out of that came, if you know the game, Mindstorms. All right? That's where it came from. Kids working with Papert and Minsky and architects and designers created something where kids could actually program computers and make things, and they actually made their product called Mindstorm. You go to a store and buy these things. But it came out of MIT research, of conversion research, with students and senior faculty working on understanding how kids work, the cognition of that, creating ability for young kids to do things. It blew everybody's mind what these kids could do, and it came out of that. And this is a toy that people buy for kids. So the circle is complete. The other thing is that MIT has a web page. It's fun to go to every day, because 90% of the time, this is what they show there. These are infographics. What is this? This is from Harvard. This is the Ebola virus. This is some of the other ones, some kind of nanotechnology. I mean, so is this art? Is it science? Again, here is an example of why art and science have to come together. You cannot see these things. You know, you might see it through an electron microscope, but you cannot have a group discussion around it until you have art. So these things are created by artists working with computer scientists, working with biotechnology, whatever it is. So, I mean, so you take this kind of stuff, thinking, like Chris, to put in the public arena. And the reason, again, for putting the public arena in places that are innovation clusters, by the way, I call them inventorying clusters, mentoring clusters. It's not the name of it. Most people don't like it. I love the name. MIT celebrates 150th birthday this year, and they had inventory. Neat name, make up a name. And it's more than invention. I just like it because it's more than invention. And it makes you think, what is invention? So again, if you take these things and put some of it into the public environment, in these clusters, not every place, you can do a little bit every place, but I really think these clusters must have some of this to make them come alive and say to people, well, you're hiring to invent the future. This is the future, and you make the future. And you do it in a way that's, you know, it meets certain societal rules, you know, you do things, and you delight people, you turn on and off. So I just wanted to sort of start this background. We're talking more than I thought I would talk. But in effect, it's a way of thinking about creating new public environments, which are not about just environments. It's about training people, exposing people, elevating people. It's all about people by using the environment and everything else. So in effect, the public environment is as much the classroom as the classroom here. Because when you think about city making or place making, there are no artificial laboratories. You have to use real places. It's not like, you know, a test tube. You can't do a city. So part of we should think of these places, these 8 or 9, and they are doing that, about thinking about them as living laboratories for creating future environments that delight people, inform people about their history, their culture, and also allow them to learn to be digitally literate and creative. So with that, I'll open up to any comments or questions.